Hello travelers, Boardman21 here, and it has been a while since I've seen you guys. Sorry for not doing any videos or streaming or any of that for the last few months. We stopped shortly after 1.0 launched, went back to work, and have just been working. I haven't done any CT testing, I haven't even played the game, so this entire patch will be new to me, so I'm very excited for all the new stuff we have in 1.1, and I plan on doing a 48-hour stream, or at least trying to do a 48-hour stream for you on launch here, as I'll only have a couple of days to play, and I really want to make it to the Pinnacle boss so that we can at least try and fight it, perhaps even beat it. I will be running a Beastmaster Raptor build, as there's a new unique for it, and it looks like it can be a ton of fun, and you all know that I love minions and that I love the Beastmaster, so put those two together with a new build, and hopefully we can have a lot of fun with it. Hope to see you there. But in other news, I want to go over a lot of the new stuff that's coming. It's going to be new for me, a lot of the stuff I haven't even touched, so I just want to go over what it is, how it works, and then of course we're going to cover my opinion of it and how I think it will affect the game. So in this we'll go through the pre-patch blog 1 and blog 2. Blog 1, we will cover these 8 things: Evade, Nemesis, the Harbingers, and the Forgotten Knight, the Pinnacle boss, the new boss defense mechanics, the Glyph of Envy, Harbinger's Needle, and some new uniques, which they only list 4 here. But then we'll jump over to the pre-blog 2, and that's going to have a bunch of the quality of life changes and other little changes that they made to a ton of things, and I'll just kind of go over those as well. I may do another video on all the new uniques. There's over 30 of them coming in this next patch, which is awesome. But let's start with Evade, which is probably single-handedly one of the biggest changes coming in this patch, and that is the ability to have a movement skill starting from level 1 that has cooldown that will scale with your character level. You'll be able to have up to 2 charges of this right off the bat. It won't have a skill tree, but everyone, all classes will have access to this, so that immediately you'll have the ability to be able to evade or move quickly out of mechanics that would otherwise hit you if your transversal skill was on cooldown, or if you didn't have enough move speed to get out of the way quick enough. Now, some things that are nice about Evade is the fact that with this you have items that can interact with it and give it new functionality or increase cooldown or give you stats while you use it or after you use it, such as like having increased dodge rating if you've used it or while you're using it. But again, the main thing about this is that it does not make you immune to damage, but it does give you a transversal skill, even though it's not considered a transversal skill and will not share cooldowns with your transversal skills, but it will again get you to move a bit quicker out of harm's way. So I haven't used it yet, I don't know how it feels. I've heard a lot of good things about it from other people in the community, and I'm very excited to try it. But this is huge, as it's a very common thing to use in a game like this. But more than that, it has the ability for all classes to have it, so that they can officially not have to balance transversal skills so much around everybody having to have one in boss fights and be able to dodge mechanics. And this will allow you to have 2 things to move out of harm's way, making boss fights a little bit more reactive for you. And then just a couple examples of how you can interact items with your Evade. Here you can see that this pair of boots, the implicit on it gives it increased cooldown recovery for Evade, so you can use it more often. This unique gives the Evade the ability to gain haste afterwards, so not only do you evade, but then afterwards you also gain haste and can move a bit faster. It gives it some cooldown recovery, and then of course we have a ring here, which is really cool. It changes your evade skill into a summon crab skill, so every time that you would use evade, instead you summon a crab, which sounds really awesome. And then it also gives you swiftness, which basically means that you have haste, although it's not haste, it's different. It's going to give you increased movement speed based on your character level, which is really cool. But again, it'll just make you a little bit more zoom at all times while being able to summon crabs, which is really awesome. Another new thing that we have for 1.1 is a new system called Nemesis, which are going to be random encounters, kind of like the exiled mages, so it's just another system like that. Nemesis is a new random encounter system you will encounter during Harbingers of Ruin. While 1.1's primary focus was going to be around the Pinnacle boss system, many players may not take the time to actually get to that point in the game, and they wanted something for those players as well, and that's where Nemesis comes in. While traveling through 𝐸terra, both during the campaign and the Monolith of Fate, you may randomly come across this new encounter type, the Nemesis. Upon spotting one of these powerful warriors slain by a Harbinger, while its armor circling around its body, you will be provided with an opportunity to add more loot to your horde. Interacting with The remains will present you with a window showing several items available from the Nemesis, as well as 3 options of what you'd like to do in regards to those items. Here you can see a little short glyph of fighting one of these Nemesises, and then you'll have 3 options upon encountering one of these. You can either banish it, which will cause the encounter to be put to rest, banishing both the current Nemesis and the items to offer. So basically, when you first come up to it like you would an exiled mage, you click on it, you're going to be presented with options, and the banish option basically just makes it go away. It's as if you never encountered it to begin with. Whatever items it had, the enemy itself, all gone. The second one will be to challenge it, and this gives you the option to challenge the Nemesis. By selecting to challenge, the Nemesis will rise from its grave to return to the fight. Should you succeed in putting the Nemesis to rest, killing it, you will receive all of the items which were displayed in the earlier UI. If you defeat the Nemesis, the next one you encounter will have new items. So, when you clicked on it, instead of banishing it and making it go away, you challenge it, you take it on, you're going to get all of the items that it had if you defeat it. And then, of course, you have a third option, which will be Empower, and this final option will be provided with its ability to empower the Nemesis. By selecting Empower, the Nemesis will awaken and attack you in its rage. Then upon defeat, it will flee instead of dropping its items. You will encounter the same Nemesis again the next time that you find one, which will have the same items available, but giving them potentially increased affix tiers, 4G potential, or legendary potential. Empowering a Nemesis can also add new affixes to items, including non-experimental sealed affixes. Empowering is able to upgrade sealed non-experimental affixes all the way to ranks or tiers 6 and 7, which hasn't been possible before. So to get the most powerful items, you would want to empower the Nemesis, defeat the Nemesis, and then take it on again later. And you can do this up to 2 times you can empower a Nemesis before you can no longer have the option to empower it even further, as it states here. And then, of course, there's a new item that comes along with this called the Egg of the Forgotten. When you have your options that come available to you for the Nemesis, you can replace, if you're going to empower it, one of the slots with the Egg of the Forgotten. And if you replace the Egg of the Forgotten, if this pops up as an option, you can replace it with a unique that does not have Weaver's Will or legendary potential in there, and there's a chance if you upgrade it that that item will indeed gain legendary potential or Weaver's Will or just some random affixes, which is really cool, a fun item to play around with in the Nemesis system. Next, we have the Harbingers and the Forgotten Knight. Now, the Harbingers are going to be a new boss that you're going to take on. You'll find one of them in each of the timelines that you'll encounter as you're gaining your corruption in those timelines, and you'll randomly encounter them. The nice thing about the Harbingers is once you defeat all 10 of the Harbingers, that's what will finally gain you access to the portal to go to the Pinnacle boss and take the boss on. So again, you'll have to go to each of the timelines and defeat the new Harbingers in each of the timelines. Once you have done all of the timelines, all 10 of them, you will then be able to do the Pinnacle boss. And that's what we're going to be trying to do in that 48 hours after launch. And our super long stream is trying to make it to the Pinnacle boss. Pinnacle boss is going to be the hardest boss in the game. Whether we defeat it or not, I don't know. But hopefully we can at least make it to there. The Forgotten Knight is going to be a new NPC that you can meet on the Shattered Road map. And basically, after you beat the first Harbinger and you gain one of the items it drops, you will bring that item to the Forgotten Knight, and that will put you into the Forgotten Knight faction. And the Forgotten Knight faction is something that you will be able to keep track of which Harbingers you've killed on which timeline and whatnot, as well as gain some factions for some extra rewards as you do it. And this will keep your progress really easy to track, so that once you can see all 10 timelines are done, this will then allow you to take on the Pinnacle boss. On top of that, as you kill your Harbingers on your timelines, the corruption that you will need to pass to be able to find the next Harbinger will go up, but this will keep track of that. As you can see here in this GIF, it tells you that the next Harbinger on this timeline will be at 300 corruption. So once you get to 300 corruption, you'd be able to take on the next Harbinger, or at least be able to randomly encounter it at that point, but not until then. And then we have the new Pinnacle boss, which is what I'm most excited for in this patch. Is possibly beating it, but most likely just encountering it is going to be fun. With the Harbinger eyes in hand, all 10 of them from each of the 10 Harbingers, each one on each timeline. Once you have all 10 of them, you can open up the portal, which will be at the portal beyond the Shattered Road. Place an eye in the altar and you'll be pulled into the Harbinger's Doom to take on the boss. Now again, once you've defeated all 10 Harbingers, each one of those is guaranteed your first 10 Harbinger kills to drop you an eye, so you'll have 10 chances through this portal once you've unlocked it, which we'll probably use all of them and then have to go defeat more Harbingers for more tries before we defeat the boss, but you'll at least have 10 attempts right off the bat. Now, here you can see a little bit of battle with the boss here. I see some really big AoEs. It looks void in all the ones that I'm seeing here, so that's going to be a nice fight. Obviously, you're going to want your void resistance. That's what I'm aiming for right before we go in there for the first time, but I'm sure you want all your resistances capped and all your other layers of defense well before you get into this boss fight. But I'm really looking forward to this. It looks like a ton of fun, and I'm hoping it's really difficult. I'm hoping I get absolutely wiped the first time I go in there, and we have to go back and farm some better gear before we can take it on again. And speaking of the Pinnacle boss, and just bosses in general, boss defenses are changing. So in the game for a while now, they've had DDR, which was the dynamic damage reduction. Basically, the more damage you did to a boss, the more damage reduction it got, so that it would take you longer to kill it, so you'd have to go through its mechanics and whatnot. Ways around this was having a build that did so much damage so quick that you could kill it before the DDR brought in, but typically that was almost impossible and builds weren't supposed to be able to do that. Some builds still could, but for the most part, any build building into damage was getting extremely getting big diminishing returns on bosses, and it felt really, really bad because of it. As of that, they're changing the entire boss defense system to now instead it's going to have these crystals, and as you do damage to the boss, there'll no longer be any damage reduction. You'll always do that same amount of damage, but every time you take its health down to these little crystal bars you have, it then gains its health in ward, and it gets basically ward protection, which means you could run around and let that ward decay over time, so you don't even have to attack it, or you can attack it and basically just have to do many layers of its health before you actually kill it. The higher in corruption you get, I believe it is, and the higher just in the end game you get, the more of these crystals, the more ward shields that it would get as you're taking its life down, and the longer that fights are going to last. Next, we have the Glyph of Envy, a new crafting item, and this item does a lot of things and it's very powerful, and yet it's also completely new and unique to the game, which is really cool. It's going to really help out your alt characters for getting through those timelines much faster in the end game, which is one of the common complaints, that alts take way too long to get too empowered to redo all the timelines, and it's not very fun. So let's cover this, exactly what it does and how it works. So alongside other tweaks to stability rates that they're introducing in 1.1, there is this new item to greatly accelerate the progress through normal timelines you have not yet completed, and even empowered timelines. It'll help you a little bit in your alt characters, or your main character if you really want to, but it's really for alt characters. So the Glyph of Envy, what it does is it destabilizes an item, unpredictably changing all properties other than the affix being upgraded. This stability is siphoned to the most recent monolith timeline you entered, greatly increasing its stability, allowing you to do the quest and whatnot much quicker than you would have been able to. Now, the forging potential of the item is not changed beyond the normal reduction that would happen on a normal craft. The changes cannot result in affixes above tier 5. Existing sealed affixes cannot be changed. Grants far more stability if you have never completed the timeline before. So let's just go over what that's saying. You take an item, it's got 4 affixes on it, and you have, say, a sword. That's a one-handed sword. Say that you have a katana or something, and on that sword you use this on the affix. The affix you're upgrading will upgrade like a normal. Your forging potential will go down. That forging potential that's lost, I believe, is what's referred to as the stability, and then that amount that's lost, that stability, is then moved to the timeline that you last entered. If you have never completed that timeline before, say you just entered the timeline and went to use this item, it will actually give you all the stability for that timeline, so you can then do all 3 quests just like that without even running a single echo. Now, the other thing that happens is the affix that you upgrade upgrades like normal, but all the other affixes on that item can randomly change their tiers and what affixes they are. On top of that, the katana sword that we were wearing can change to any of the other subtypes as well, which would change the implicits of that item. And so all of that can change. It's completely unpredictable what happens to that item, completely random. So it's really cool if you're looking for a different base type. This is another way that you could possibly get it, as well as getting all that stability for your timeline. And just to cover that a little bit more in depth, we'll just read through this here. By upgrading an affix using a Glyph of Envy, it will have 2 effects, one on the item itself and the second effect on your most recently accessed timeline on that character. On the item, it will upgrade the selected affix as normal. In addition, every other property of the item will be changed other than the item type. This means a ring will remain a ring, but the 3 other affixes as well as the subtype of that ring will be randomized to completely new stats. So you could now go from a silver ring to a turquoise ring, for example, as well as all the other affixes changing. Having destabilized the item, the glyph siphons off the lost stability, which I believe it's the lost forging potential, however much you lost, and it grants it to the most recently accessed timeline. The bottom of the forging window will tell you which timeline received the stability. If it is a normal timeline that you have not already completed it, the glyph will grant the timeline full stability, meaning you can then go in and just do the quest and be done with it. That is way faster than before. This allows you to immediately conquer the timeline objectives. If it's empowered timeline or a normal timeline that you have already conquered, it will instead have a moderate burst of stability added. Glyphs of Envy can only be found within level 100 zones and drop most commonly from rare enemies and Harbingers. So in other words, your main character, your first character you run, you're going to have to get to empowered content level 100 areas and kill rare enemies and Harbingers to have these drop, which you can then transfer, as long as you're not playing solo mode, to your other alt characters, and they'll have a much faster time progressing through the end game. We then have the Harbinger's Needle. Harbinger's Needle is a new item coming in Harbingers of Ruin to further assist with pushing corruption. This is a very unique item in terms of what it can do. It's new to the game, and it's the first consumable equipped item. This is a small idol, and essentially what this is, when you go to kill a timeline boss, you put this idol on, and then if you kill the timeline boss and you're above 90 corruption, the timeline boss will grant you 3 additional Gaze of Orbises. Gaze of Orbises are also changing in 1.1, in which a Gaze of Orbis no longer has diminishing return. Every Gaze of Orbis will gain you 12 corruption on your next Orbis kill, but you can only consume 4 of them at once. However more you have than 4, they just roll over to the next one. So gaining 3 of those means this item, if you kill a timeline boss, is going to give you 36 additional corruption the next time that you take on an Orbis and to kill it successfully. Then we have some new uniques. Here's a list of 4 of them. I may do another video on all 30 of them that are coming in. But some of the cool ones that you can see here, we have the Event Horizon, which gives you penetration against all resistances, gives you more melee damage per stack of dilation. You gain a stack of dilation when you hit at least 1 enemy. Some cool things there. Of course, you kind of have like this reduced movement speed and attack speed based on how many stacks of dilation, but you also do more damage per stack of dilation. So it's kind of a meme, weapon. I'll be curious to see if anyone comes up with stuff with it. Perhaps something that doesn't care about movement speed or attack speed, but can also have enough hits to get all those stacks, which would be cool. We have the Wall of Nothing, which has this new affix stat of a % chance to take 0 damage when hit, which I believe is the same as like parry. But again, pretty cool new stat line that we have there. Could be pretty powerful in the end game. This one gives you some ward decay threshold, endurance, some word per second and such. We have Aberos Command. Void Cleave is now instant, no longer has a cooldown, and it's not a movement skill either. Void Cleave no longer has a weapon requirement, which means you can now wear anything. Of course, you have to put on a scepter in order to do that, but this just allows you to use Void Cleave with the scepter on, essentially. Ravaging Auras created by Void Cleave lasts an additional 8 seconds and have 40% Void Penetration. Gives you a ton of increased damage over time, area for area seals, and some Void Pen. And then we have Phase Point, which is a new quiver. This gives you dodge rating, increase and flat, a % chance to gain Dust Shroud on dodge, a % to gain Dust Shroud, or a chance to gain a black arrow on dodge, and then black arrows can also give you Dust Shrouds. Keep that in mind if you're skilled into it. And you get +1 bow void damage per Dust Shroud when using a black arrow. So when you pick up a black arrow, consume a black arrow, whatever, you then get +1 bow void damage per Dust Shroud that you have on your character, and there are many ways to get those. So this could turn into a very good, if you love bow skills, you could do a void damage type marksman, which would be really, really cool. And that's it from the pre-patch blog 1 that they had. This is the second one, some quality of life changes. So just to really quickly wrap up this video and just to kind of go over some of these, some mechanical changes they have is changes to blessings. This is a really big one for quality of life. Whenever you unlock a blessing, it's now unlocked for all of your characters in that game mode. So if you just play softcore and all your characters are softcore, all the blessings that they have found, and that includes the ones you didn't pick when you kill the timeline boss, so all the options that pop up and the rules, the highest rule will stay, and all of those options will become available to all of your characters in that game mode. So this will very easily make it to where you will now be able to see all of them, and you can go to a new NPC in town, just like you could with the Chronomancer to respec your passives. You can now respec for a little bit of gold your blessings and switch between them on characters without having to redo the bosses. That is a huge quality of life, and it's going to feel much better. I'm very excited for that one. Another change that we have is ladder improvements. They're now going to have ladders for levels, so people that level up really fast and the fastest levelers will now have a ladder for them instead of just the arena people having it. So if you're one of those that want to be on the ladder but you hate arena, you can now just push a character as quickly as you can to level 100 to get your name on that ladder, which will be a ton of fun. And then, of course, another change we have here is the Monolith Timeline Search. This one's huge. We've been asking for this for a long time. You can now search your timeline for echo rewards or for certain modifiers, whatever it is that you want to search for, or you can even click on the icon to instantly have the reward types and have all those types pop up. If you want keys, if you want experience books, if you want gold rewards, it'll show you where all of those are so that you can easily navigate, especially if your web is getting really, really big. There's some loot filter improvements. A lot of people have been asking for these, and now you can have multiple conditions on affixes and things like that. The other thing that you can have is that legendary potential and Weaver's Will can be filtered as well. So you can now search for only uniques that have, say, 2 legendary potential or higher, or you can find uniques that just have Weaver's Will and hide all other uniques, whatever it is that you're wanting. Or you can make Weaver's Will pop up a different color than the other legendaries that pop up, which is really cool. Another thing we have is item faction changes. A lot of the rewards have been changed. There's now 12 ranks instead of 10. A lot of the ranks, some of the ranks have new rewards. Some of the rewards have been moved either from the bottom half to the top to just make them feel better. I'm not going to read through all of those changes, but in short, it should feel much more smooth. A lot of the end game things like doubling your prophecies are still at the end, but other things like exalted affixes, they don't fall so early in the game, they fall a bit later, and instead you get other things earlier in the game. Then we have item faction changes. There's now 12 ranks instead of 10. Some of those ranks were reworked. Some of them have been moved up or down in the list. I'm not going to go over all of those, but just know that there are some changes. And the progression speed for it has changed as well. It takes less reputation to achieve rank 12 in 1.1 than it did rank 10 in 1.0. And then at the same time, you also get a boost to how fast you're getting increased favor. For every rank that you go up, you get 5% increased favor gain for doing all the same stuff. So you will get there much, much faster than you would have before. But again, there are 12 ranks now instead of 10, so there's a couple of new things for both the Circle of Fortune and the Merchant's Guild. I'm not going to go over exactly what those are in this video, but just know that they'll be a little bit different. And then also remember that the new faction, the Forgotten Knight faction, goes on top of whichever ones of these you pick. So you can run, they'll go at the same time. The Forgotten Knight faction will give you rewards of its own, and you can have it on top of the Circle of Fortune or Merchant's Guild, whichever one that you picked. Then we have the Gaze of Orbis changes, which I've told you already. The Gaze of Orbis, which would grant you a diminishing return on the amount of corruption that it would give you, now it just gives you a flat 12 no matter how many of them you have, and you will consume up to 4 of them every time that you do the Orbis kill for that extra corruption. On top of that, if you have more than 4 Gaze of Orbises, the extras roll over. So if you save up say 12 of them, you could do 3 Orbises in a row, and that would allow you to use 4 each time, gaining you 48 corruption on that timeline each time from the Gaze of Orbises themselves. There are a ton of passives that got updated. There are a ton of skills that got updated, and of course channeling skills no longer don't allow you to mana regen, so you can now regen mana while channeling skills, which is going to change a ton of things like Disintegrate and Warpath and things like that. So very excited to see what people come up with those. I probably won't have too much time for it, but the last thing that I want to cover in this video is the ward balance. We all know that ward has been a problem. A lot of builds have this potential to have tens, if not 100,000 ward in some builds, which makes it an absolute joke against bosses when they can just stand in any of the mechanics and survive. And so they made some changes to the formula for ward balance, and this should make it much easier to have ward at lower amounts, as well as amounts that say went over 10,000 ward are going to be much harder to keep that ward. And so as you can see in this little graph, you can see the old formula was that you had a set 40% ward decay per second. So you would degen 40% of your current ward over the course of a second, and that wouldn't matter how much ward you had, it was always the same rate. That would of course be decreased by how much ward retention you had. So the more ward retention you had, the much lower that percentage would get, allowing you to just kind of scale higher and higher ward, especially the more of it you were generating. The new one is going to do 20% of your ward per second, but it's also going to scale up with how much ward you have. The more ward you have, the more faster that percent decay is going to be per second. And as you can see here, once you reach about 5 to 10,000 here in this area, it just gets absolutely exponentially higher, and it's going to take your ward away. So as soon as you break that 10,000 ward barrier, your ward's going to disappear very, very fast, which means you're not going to have these builds with ridiculous amounts, or at least you shouldn't, in theory, have them anymore. And here for the formulas, you can see here, it was 40% of your current ward divided by how much ward retention you had. Now it's going to be 20% of your current ward plus a 5% of the amount of ward you have squared of current ward divided by your ward retention. And essentially what this means is the more ward you have, the faster this percentage will be, which means that at about 10,000 ward is where they cut it off. You actually have more ward decay than you had before. So hopefully this puts ward builds more in line with the current leech and health builds that we have, and we see it be a little bit more even. We don't see these builds with 100,000 ward going into boss fights and just standing in all the mechanics while they kill it, which would be awesome. But that's going to wrap it up for this video. Hopefully, if you didn't know these things were coming, you know now. Hopefully you're excited for a lot of them as much as I am. I'm excited to try out all of them. I think a lot of the quality of life changes are huge. I think the evade is going to be a lot of fun. A lot of the new uniques look awesome. And again, I'll be trying to get one of those new uniques, which is going to be called Nail's Tooth, which allows you to summon raptors up to your companion limit. So kind of like the squirrels or the wolves, you can now have a bunch of raptors running around. So I plan on doing a Beastmaster Raptor build, and hopefully we're going to do a stream, hopefully up to 48 hours, and hopefully make it all the way to the Pinnacle boss, which would be a lot of awesome. I hope to see you guys there. The link will be in a pinned comment below. As always, stay safe, and I'll see you guys in the world of 𝐸terra.